was Hollywood, once considered a suburb of sprawling Los Angeles, destined, perhaps doomed, to become its very heart. In 1916, however, it was just a junction of dirt roads and a scattering of orange groves. If there was sin, it was not to be seen. Scandalous sin, that is. For what was going on at a studio on Sunset Boulevard was merely play acting. A Babylonian orgy involving hundreds, nay, thousands of actors and extras portraying the doom of Belshazzar. This passion play, D.W. Griffith's most ambitious epic, was titled Intolerance, and it set the tone for Tinseltown. Something to live up to, something to live down. The shadow of Babylon had fallen over Hollywood. Scandal was waiting, just out of camera range. Meet the Golden People, rich beyond dream, idolized and adored by common folk the world over. They were the producers, stars, and moneylenders to an infant industry. An autograph from any one of them could send shivers down the back of the yous and me's of the period. A lock of hair, pubic or otherwise, was valued in mortgages and diamonds. Yet the truth was soon to come. Yes, these are the anointed ones, tapped on the shoulder by fame, as wildly undisciplined as the most primitive jungle beast, with rules and morals cut her too low. It's hard to believe that a simple smile from one of them could make the day for a waitress, a garage mechanic, or even a doting studio head. If Mom and Dad could only see them now. What these people failed to realize was plated gold chips and peels to expose the plaster that can shatter by a simple fall. And some of them did fall. Yes, 1916 was quite a year. The horseless carriage came into its own. But trouble was looming on the horizon. The war had been raging in Europe since 1914, and the United States didn't enter the conflict until April of 1917. Reading off a list of complaints to the Congress, President Wilson dealt America a hand in World War I. Young men from all walks of life were tapped by the draft, and rugged training schedules were put into effect. It had a remarkable result on the infant motion picture business. Little heard-of towns became training centers, and opportunistic theater owners practically promised a captive audience, built new theaters near the camps, and the demand for more product came as a clarion call to Hollywood. The studios began grinding out films like so many sausages. New stars were created every day, and Tinseltown was cashing in on the war. But all was not for profit. Well-known stars did their part, making appearances at rallies and selling millions in bonds. Meanwhile, the transfusion of American fighting men was taking its effect on the tide of the battle. Doughboys, fresh and fit, reinforced battle-weary Allied troops in the trenches. Big guns sent their death-dealing charges across no man's land, breaking the spirit of the enemy. By the fall and winter of 1918, well-mounted offensives had the Germans reeling. They surrendered by the tens of thousands. Producers in Hollywood were planning to cash in even more on this dramatic bonanza. While awaiting the almost certain outcome of the war, their writers were grinding out scripts playing on the heroics of our boys over there. The Hun became the most ferocious enemy known to man, and khaki became a proud color. Then the Johnnies came marching home again, through Paris, through New York Harbor with its proud statue, along Constitution Avenue in Washington and Fifth Avenue, New York. They were home again, and after the grim business of war, they needed a few laughs, and Hollywood would be ready for them. A music hall comedian from London proved to be the most brilliant, prolific maker of flicks of the time. Later destined to become a principal in Hollywood Babylon's most sensational divorce conflict. Oh, how they shone. Ranch hands, garage mechanics, plumbers' helpers, waitresses and shop girls all found themselves propelled to adulation, fame, and fortune, and not too many could handle the responsibility. For example, this was Paris, 1920. Destined to become the background and jumping-off place for a decade that would rock the very foundations of the motion picture industry. A decade when incidents that might be labeled scandalous and in the past neatly covered up would be brought to the attention of the public. It started in the very fashionable Hotel Creole.
Ah, bonjour, madame. What a lovely day. Madame? Madame?
This suite was registered in the name of Olive Thomas, otherwise known to her adoring fans as the ideal American girl. The news stunned the film capital and its golden people. Olive Thomas, her promising career in the ascent, had taken her own life, an overdose of barbiturates, her tool of destruction. At the insistence of her studio, the Sûreté, renowned for its investigative prowess, began digging for reasons that caused the tragedy. But as it turned out, the studio's request would have been better forgotten. What the investigation disclosed and was duly reported by the newspapers was an abyss in her private life that did not jive with her Hollywood projected image as a sweet young thing. A fantastic story began to circulate about Olive's trip to Paris. It was said she was desperately trying to connect for a large quantity of drugs to supply her husband, a hopeless addict. This was confirmed upon the arrest of an important pusher of cocaine and heroin. In his little black book of steady clients was the name of Olive Thomas. Perhaps to compare the Olive Thomas story to today's drug-oriented society might be an exaggeration, but not by much. Young people suddenly steeped in fame and fortune, Janis Joplin for one, seeking new thrills, new avenues of delight and enjoyment, find themselves caught up in narcotics, deadly, devastating, soul-searing, and body-destroying. Anticipating a delayed honeymoon, Olive had gone ahead to Paris, supposedly to shop for antiques for her new dream home and clothes for herself. But investigation disclosed her Parisian perambulations had not been directed to the chic salons or flea markets the City of Lights was famous for. She'd been seen nightclubbing at the Jockey and the Maldoror with some of the most notorious gentlemen from the French underworld. She sought out the meanest dives of Montmartre, distinctly acknowledged his hangouts for drug addicts and pushers. Rumor followed atop rumor. Though the communication systems of the period hardly equal today's, word was leaking through Tinseltown, casting vicious clouds of doubt and some despair. They were described by some as sickening aspersions, by others as gospel. But the damage had been done. The Olive Thomas incident had launched a torpedo into the very bowels of the film industry. The entire entertainment field came under close scrutiny and attack, just as it is today. When you live or die in the limelight, others get spattered by your leavings. The tabloid headlines were tall and black. Olive Thomas, dope fiend. Thus was lovable kid sister Olive revealed to the entire world as some kind of a monster of unspeakable depravity. Something of a jolt to the fans of the star, destroying the image of the ideal American girl. And it started Hollywood on the path to become the sin capital of the universe. In 1919, Variety ran a popularity poll that placed Wally Reed high among the top 15 leading men at the box office, and his youthful following was phenomenal. Young America worshipped Wally as a suave, optimistic dapper Dan who always made good. His studio pushed him through a non-stop production schedule that had little to recommend them but the personality of the star. The grueling pace began to tell. And in 1920, while working on Forever, Wally took his first morphine fix. Wally's wife announced that she intended to avenge the death of her husband and had turned over to the police the names of Wally's friends, those who had drawn him into a life of drink, dope, and debauchery. She said they called themselves the Hollywood Hellraisers. They came, they stayed, they drank. It wasn't a home. It became a roadhouse. And even his bosses, money-hungry movie magnates, felt no concern for human life. Their main drive was the great god dollar, or they could have stopped him. This handsome young man, his popularity zooming, was pressed beyond the point of capability, driven by box office reports, guided by leeches who sucked the very blood from his veins. Wally started on the nosedive to death. It certainly appeared that he was living a good life. A mansion worth in the hundreds of thousands, 5 cars in the garage, a contingent of leaders on kissing his feet. He was idolized by literally millions of moviegoers. A heady reaction had to cost more than talent, more than life itself. His parties became famous, or would infamous be a better choice of words? Every buck he earned cost him a pint of life. Yeah, Wally was a star, a flight to oblivion, whatever the terms, and they were stiff. Gosh, it was great to be surrounded by the golden people, and Wally believed he could handle the action. Proof of the pudding? If only the studio could understand the monster they were building, Wally might have died of old age. One wild party after another, his wife said, each worse than the one before.
have a drink.
Wallace, will you please send your friends home?
But honey, the party just started. Come on down and join in.
Nobody could do anything with Wally. And then, morphine. Wally died in a padded cell on January 18th, 1923, and Hollywood exploded once again. With a fallen idol, Wally Reed, dead at 30, Hollywood hoped they would never see another year like the scandal-strewn nightmare of 1922. It was America's sweetheart who delivered Wally's epitaph. She said, "His death is a very great tragedy. I know he would have lived down every mistake he made. But when Hollywood..." Fresco Fatty Arbuckle was a hefty plumber's helper discovered by Max Sennett in 1913 when he came to unclog the producer's drain. Sizing up the good-natured 266-pounder, he offered him a job on the spot at $5 a day. Fatty's value as a laugh-maker rocketed his $5 a day to $5,000 a week when he signed with a major studio. And more was yet to come. When Fatty's contract was renewed at a tremendous increase in salary, he decided to celebrate in his own twisted fashion.
Is everybody happy?
What's about pleasure and the host?
Oh, come on, Fatty. Tipsy to do you any good.
You've had that excuse for 5 years. Tonight's the night.
You're hurting me.
That's the last thing I want to do.
Better read later.
You're perfect right now. Now, are you coming, or do I carry you?
Perfectly capable of getting up from my...
That's Uncle Fatty's good girl. Uncle Fatty's got a reward for you. 5 years this tomato's been putting me up.
You got a lot of catching up to do.
And I'm just a bozo to do it.
Fatty had had his eye on Virginia for some time. In fact, he tried to get her to work in several of his films with little success. But Virginia, who sought fame as a dramatic actress, attended this party on Fatty's assurance that her career would be furthered by contact with some of his friends. Fatty had to realize that these people were not drawn to him for his attractiveness. They hung on because as fast as he made a buck, that's how fast he'd spend it. Easy come, easy go. That was Fatty's philosophy. Get a laugh, a lover, give a party, whatever the tariff would be. It was a time in Hollywood before heavy income tax became a way of life, when pleasure was measured in dollars and cents, that the golden people truly reigned. No one could deny that it was the good life, but too often the price was exorbitant. They were riding high, and the higher they rose, the harder would be the eventual fall. It was an unhealthy situation that was to grow worse. But the dangers were ignored by those too close to the forest to see the trees, or perhaps too far removed from stability for proper emotional balance. Fun with a capital F was their cornerstone, easy to crumble under the slightest pressure. Fatty believed himself to be a great lover. But rumor had it that he was most inadequate in this department. That would prove to be his downfall. If only his fans could see their jolly fat star now. It's doubtful he'd get many laughs. Why would he completely lose control of his senses is a question still unanswered. True, he had a willing victim, so freaked out that she gave herself eagerly to this bizarre act of lovemaking, unaware how it would end for her, and the resultant effect on Fatty's career. On October 10th, 1 year to the day after the death of Olive Thomas, Virginia Rapp died. her chances forever ended to become a star. Fame was to be hers nonetheless when Fatty was charged with her murder. All the world knew the name of Virginia Rapp. With each scandal costing them millions in investments, the producers for the first time realized they must pull together. As hungry as they were for box office, as competitive as they had been toward each other, and as much as they distrusted each other, they called a meeting to form an association. Remembering the baseball Black Sox scandal, they also reluctantly appointed a czar, one who would dictate policy to even them. He was Will Hayes, a member of the president's cabinet. At $50,000 a year, he set out to purge the dishonor of Hollywood. He found his hands full. He was attempting to stop a train with a traffic light. She was one of the rising stars on the horizon. A former showgirl, her acting left something to be desired. But off the screen, she shone a little brighter, particularly in the eyes of a multi-millionaire publisher. He became her sponsor in more ways than one. But a vast age difference made it difficult to satisfy her every need. So she chose an occasional substitute. A successful young star of the period, rumored to have organs of equine dimensions. But Big Daddy was no fool. Private detectives reported her movements in full and highly descriptive detail.
Daddy! You're home! What's the matter? You look as cross as an old bear. What's wrong? What'd I do? Daddy, don't! Oh, no! No!
He chastised her soundly, and she swore complete faithfulness in a most demonstrative way. On a November day in 1924, Big Daddy invited a group of celebrities and friends aboard his yacht for a pleasure cruise. And when Big Daddy extended an invitation, it was like a command from the royal court. Despite his reputation as a confirmed teetotaler and giver of tedious parties, people, some successful, some ambitious, some fearful for their futures, flocked to the landing, prepared for what they expected would be another dull outing. Little did they know that the outcome would be a final journey for one of them. Once underway, the guests were pleasantly surprised to find that Big Daddy proved to be a most congenial host. Contrary to usual policy, champagne corks popped almost immediately. Many of the hip, flask-carrying people prepared by past cruises that left throats dry could hardly conceal their delight. The usual restraint that attended these outings disappeared, and all were at ease in Big Daddy's presence for the first time in memory. But since their host was known for his explosive temper, an edge of wariness remained over the festivities, and well it might have, considering what the immediate future held. Past knowledge of the relationship between the star and his young mistress still strong in his memory, Big Daddy made a mental note to keep them apart. However, they found ways of meeting openly. But in Big Daddy's mind, they were formulating a plan that called for more privacy. And he would be ready for them. trying to remain pleasant became more difficult as at every turn he found the two together. Fuse to his anger grew shorter. Though the events of the afternoon still remained in his mind, the plot that he believed hatched to cuckold him, Big Daddy continued to disguise his suspicion. On the surface, he remained the charming host, smiling and chatting with his guests. But at the same time, he kept his young lady at his side, while continuing a constant notation of the young star's whereabouts. He was aware it would be impossible to keep his younger companion faithful for the balance of their relationship, realizing that he could not satisfy all her cravings. His age was beginning to show during their love bouts. However, he was determined that if anyone were to share her with him, it would not be the young star. He wanted her to have the good life, but on his terms. It was only when a highly respected business associate desired a word with him that he dropped his guard. And the final link in the chain of happenings destined for this moonlit night was ready to drop into place. They were gone, both of them, and he knew that even aboard a vessel that size, there were few places to hide. Thus, Big Daddy's belief that he had disposed of a hated rival proved wrong. The man he had mortally wounded was a renowned producer of Western films, a totally unsuspected friend. And a new career was born. For the only witness was an ambitious young publicity girl who was destined by her most timely appearance to become one of Hollywood's most feared gossip mongers. While the front pages of the nation's newspapers were empty of any reference to the accident aboard the yacht, buried inside was a small obituary notice drawing attention to the fact that a noted producer-director had died as a result of acute indigestion following a very large meal. On the brighter side, there were the bathing beauties. In the lead, Gloria Swanson made it big. And speaking about big, who's that behind her? They became stars, all right. Stars at parades, displaying themselves daringly in swim and beach fashions of the future. But they were for fun, a commodity needed badly by Hollywood as more scandal loomed. The place, a Hollywood tea room. The players, one of the screen's most beloved stars, his future second wife, and his future mother-in-law.
Right this way, sir. Is this all right, sir?
Perfect.
This waitress, believe it or not, was destined to become the popular star's mother-in-law. And this is how it allegedly began.
And I'll top it off with the strawberry shortcake.
Yes, sir. You know, this is a real thrill waiting on you. We never miss a one of your pictures.
That's nice. That's your husband?
No, my daughter. He deserted us. That's my daughter sitting over there.
Very pretty. How old is she?
7. She just had a birthday last week. Oh, what a lovely present. Would you give her an autograph?
Of course. Send her over. And what's your name?
Lisa, and I love you.
What a charming little girl. An autograph is not enough for this sweet thing. Here, buy yourself a dolly, sweetheart.
Oh, sir, you're too much. Aren't you going to say thank you to the nice man?
Thank you.
Our star didn't know it, but he was hooked. He took the child under his wing, and as she grew to maturity, he decided to make a star out of her, among other things. He changed her name and gave her acting lessons, among other things. Until one day, the bomb was dropped.
Of course, I expect you to do the proper thing.
The nymphette was, in simple terms, knocked up, and the proper thing was marriage. There they were, the 35-year-old star and his 16-year-old Lolita, who almost became a movie star.
Cállate, ya me das lata, me das mucho lata. Yo no quiero oírte nada. No, seguro, aquí eres tú. Espérame, tantito. ¿Cómo estás, señorita?
In a decaying Mexican village that smelled of human urine and donkey dung, they were married by the mayor.
¿Cómo está, señor?
Come on, let's get on with it.
Mire, señorita, párese por aquí, por favor. Nos encontramos unidos en este día para unir en este sagrado matrimonio a esta pareja con la gracia de Dios. Si alguna persona presente conoce o tiene algún impedimento público o privado que sea motivo para que no puedan ser unidos, entonces quiero que ahora mismo se sepa, ¿verdad? Y si no, pues prosigamos. Señor, ¿acepta usted a esta mujer por su legítima esposa para amarla en pobreza, riqueza, enfermedad o salud hasta que la muerte los separe? What the devil did he say?
Just say I do.
I do.
Señorita, su esposo legítimo para amarle en pobreza, riqueza, enfermedad o salud hasta que la muerte nos los separe?
I do. Oh, you poor baby. Mama's here. You, look what you've done to her.
That's the last time I ever do it the old-fashioned way.
In 1927, a complaint for divorce was filed in Los Angeles Superior Court, confirming the star's pledge never to do it the old-fashioned way. Eventually, he got his way. But in winning, he charted the course for defeat, for what he had painstakingly urged his wife to perform was in violation of Section 288A of the California Penal Code, a felony. It was this sword, dangled over his head, that cost him a $1 million divorce settlement. Her name was Theodosia Goodman, a Cincinnati girl, daughter of a simple tailor, in constellation to be loathed by women, lusted after by men. They gave her the title Vamp, and she was reborn, heralded as an escapee from a pasha's harem. Tita Barra, product of a bucket of lies, brought lines to the box office. And those lines gave birth to others who sought the title Vamp. Every studio had to have at least one on their roster. A girl-woman whose main objective was to turn on the male population and create new fashions for the females. Heavy makeup and heavy-handed performances became the cornerstone for many a career. The male answer to the Vamp was on the horizon. Rudolph Valentino. He didn't merely make an appearance on the scene, he exploded onto it. He, too, created a style, often copied, never successfully. He was dashing and handsome, the very epitome of what a movie star should be. Adored by women and resented by their husbands and boyfriends. He became the screen's most highly rated lover. A former ballroom dancer, he moved with a grace and confidence that sent girls old and young into swoons of delight. He became a living legend, nay, a living god, worshipped the world over. Even now, decades after his untimely death, there are cults that treasure his memory, his achievements, and ignore his weaknesses. Yes, this romantic idol had weaknesses. One in particular was for masculine, domineering women. Twice married, both times to renowned dykes, he played a strange role in their under-the-table, or better said, atop-the-bed affairs. It was rumored that he was a voyeur, and some of the activities he observed might have turned off a large number of his fans, although some might have enjoyed the view along with him. It's obvious that the watchees are enjoying themselves as much as the watcher. These strange, twisted girls, being paid to pleasure each other, perform their act in the strictest of confidence. For Rudy, a natural target for scandal, had already felt the sting of the male-dominated press.
So I said to this queen, you're not exactly the most masculine thing I've seen around town.
I couldn't do anything like that. I have a position to protect.
I've seen it, sweetheart. It's beautiful.
I was married to that bitch for 3 years before I found out she was queer.
You mean this took
Very unique bar. You'll meet many interesting people.
When the Chicago Tribune learned that Rudy was due in town for a personal appearance, it issued an editorial questioning his virility. To quote in part, "An astonishing dance hall, the Chic, with an exclusively masculine clientele, has recently opened in Chicago. In the men's lounge, filled with swishing sissies, it only takes a dime to receive a jet of perfume powder on cheeks that would be better off slapped. Without any doubt, for all these refinements, we can thank men like Valentino, that pink powder puff." On August 23rd, 1926, at 10 minutes after noon, Rudolph Valentino died. In New York's Polyclinic Hospital of peritonitis, they said. True or not, Rudy and death became grist for the rumor mills. Emasculation was more like it, some were heard to grumble. Arsenic poisoning by a scorned woman was a more romantic reason that was whispered. But whatever the cause, his funeral took the form of a macabre bazaar. Over 100,000 people stormed the undertakers, each one of them battling for a final look at this star of stars. Hysteria ruled the day. The mob was equally divided. One half were women who refused to accept the truth, the other half men, hungry to confirm it. Pola Negri fainted across the coffin and was assisted away, vowing undying love. But it was Rudy himself who wrote his own epitaph, courageously hanging on to a thin thread of life. His final words were, "Now, do they still think me a pink powder puff?" The other side of tragedy is comedy. Clichés have it that only a thin line divides them. But the difference is darkness and light. For some reason, tears of laughter taste less salty than tears of sorrow. Let us give you an opportunity to sample the difference. Buster Keaton, a sad-faced pantomimist, just the thought of him could bring a chuckle. But the only time he smiled was on the way to the bank, a trip he made often. Acrobatic Al St. John, a converted contortionist, his rubbery body made him the perfect foil for other comedians. A lot of comedians like Fatty Arbuckle, who, though his career ended in sorrow and scandal, was a prime purveyor of mirth. trademark horn-rimmed glasses, Mr. Milquetoast personified, Mr. Clean in real life. His kind kept Hollywood alive, even dangling at the end of a rope. Marie Dressler, the distaff side of comedy. Perhaps a predate of women's liberation. And the man with whom she would play men to his bill, Wally Beery, teamed with Raymond Hatton. Even war could become a laughing matter. One of the earliest of the screen comics was John Bunny. His corpulent cleverness, aided and abetted by stooges long forgotten, opened avenues for scores of other young men and women who yearned recognition in the field of humor. Even love had a sense of humor. But the king, yes, the ruler of the comedy roost, remained Charlie Chaplin. His expertly disguised grace and agility, his sensitive timing, his, and we use the word literally, genius, kept him at the pinnacle, the very top of humor. He was an import from Germany, discovered in one of Berlin's most notorious nightclubs, and in an act that consisted of a suggestive duet. Her discoverer was a well-known director who had just signed a contract with one of America's leading studios. It was the fashion of the period to introduce imported star material, some genuine, some contrived, as in the case of Theodosia Goodman, as you remember, Theda Barrett. Their exotic backgrounds added to their value at the great God box office. The director was no fool. He foresaw, and foresaw well, a highly successful future in this music hall dolly. There was something about her that turned him on, and he properly accounted that if she could arouse his interest, with proper handling, personally attended to by him, she could be molded into one of the golden people. Before her performance was over, he had already shrewdly plotted his campaign to entice her no matter what the cost.
You will come to America with me, yeah?
But what about my husband?
I will make you a star. Isn't that more important?
Rudolph is important to me.
If you promise to keep him out of the way, he can come along. Verstanden? Hmm?
Rudolph never gives me away.
And so the music hall princess sailed across the sea to stardom. Along with stardom came the not-so-fringe benefits. A liveried limousine, a magnificent wardrobe, properly provided by the studio in creating her new image. A publicity campaign that matched the launching of an ocean liner. And the opportunity to live the life of opulence reserved for the very rich. A facade borrowed by Tinseltown. Her home, rented of course, reflected the all-out build-up she was receiving. She was properly seen out with this star and that, gave fabulous parties, attended by command performance appearances of her fellow studio gold mines. And that body, that million-dollar body became world-renowned, to the point of being insured by Lloyd's of London, a front-page story if there ever was one. She was riding high, yet somehow she managed to conceal a shocking private life. It would appear that our leggy star insisted on her husband along to cover her own odd mores and ways. But not so. Her circle of friends was composed of some of the film colony's wilder women, known as the Gillette blades for their double-edged diversions. To some, unwise to the ways of Hollywood, this might appear to be a modeling session, which in a manner it is. The director's putting our star through a series of wardrobe tests. Not for any particular role she will play, on the screen that is. The explanation? Well, it seems the director has his hang-ups too. In order to become aroused, he requires his bed partner to costume herself in a fashion that fits his mood of the moment, and as you see, he's not an easy man to please.
Perfect. Absolutely unique.
But once satisfied, he's a demon. On that night, our star struck a blow for women's lift. From that time to this, women, as well as their men, wear the pants in the family. But while scandal piled upon scandal, scorn hanging its heavy cloud over some of the falling stars, there remained the heroes, the men boys' dreams were made of, the cowpokes. William S. Hart was among the first, stern of eye but tender of heart, no pun intended. He shot straight and never lost. Tom Mix and Tony. What youngster didn't dream of having this relationship with a horse? Buck Jones, the true Western hero, from the top of his 10-gallon Stetson to the tip of his hand-tooled boots. Unfortunately, he played his role off the screen as well as on it. He died a hero's death in a horrible nightclub fire in Boston while touring military camps during World War II. But while they rode across millions of miles of silver screen, new problems were a warning for Hollywood. He was known as the most horrible Hun in Hollywood and the perennial source of scandalous rumor.
Who's getting the junior?
over there.
He's coming. He's coming. Morning. Good morning. Good morning. Morning. My Kenneth Anger. How are you, sweetheart? You're looking very well, sweetheart. Yes. Who is this man?
You know me, Joe.
I don't know nobody except those that are working on this set.
He's the second president of this company.
This is a closed set that includes the president and the vice president and all these flunkies. Out with you! Get out of here!
All right, but LB will hear about this.
Yes, about LB or any of them. Oh. Hello, darling. Let's all assume the positions we had yesterday when we left off. Okay, if you please.
The saga of the horrible Hun in Hollywood, truly the battle of a giant against pygmies, was doomed to end badly. Front office men from studio to studio echoed, working with him is like shoveling dollars down a well. It finished him as a director, but he had left his mark. The 20s were over, and somehow Hollywood survived. This was Hollywood Boulevard then, and now. The main drag of a small town forced to grow too quickly, peopled by a society burdened with the same problem. And while a street can afford to go honky-tonk, even a city, the golden people must not tarnish. But just traveling from one decade to another does not slow the progress of debilitation. Accept stardom, and you accept the responsibilities that go with it. Every trip to the toilet is counted and recounted. Every love affair is duly noted and publicized. Marriages land on the rocks more often than not. Scandal is the constant companion of the new breed of golden people. They've run the gamut from I want to be alone to y'all come. Mistakes in judgment made by Joe Dokes and Sally Smith can be overlooked, ignored, and forgotten. Let a star drop a participle, and the whole world is there to watch. A ripple in a Hollywood pool can cause tidal waves across the face of the earth. Yet, where would we be without them? Resemblance to a star is universally accepted as a compliment. Hemlines rise and fall at the mere whim of an Elizabeth this or an Ava that. The moments of entertainment provided by the Golden Ones would confuse the most complex of computers, and the millions of dollars they've earned and spent could support the economies of entire nations. Yes, the shadow of Babylon still loomed over Hollywood and continued to do so. Her name was Clara. Not too popular of a name in these days, but how many babies were named after her? Chances are, if you know a woman named Clara in her 40s or 50s, she was very possibly labeled in honor of this star. She sparkled and bubbled on the screen. But at the same time, she was laying the groundwork for one of the first scandals of the next decade, the 30s. She was known as the It Girl and the hottest jazz baby in films, and she lived in the fashion that reflected her stardom. Though her home was valued in six figures, a tidy sum in those days, and while her furnishings mirrored the tastes of top decorators of the period, the focal point, the what might be called entertainment center, was her plush bedroom. It was rumored that the traffic through its doors could be compared to today's freeways at the peak of the rush hour. Actors, some little known, others household names, were almost constant visitors. But this fiery love machine took them all in stride, or perhaps it might better be said she took them lying down. It was the pressures of her career, she once explained, the need to be her real self. She had tried other forms of relaxation, tennis, golf, croquet, but they took too much out of her. She was left too weary for her favorite indoor sport. One of her more exotic affairs was more of a treat than a treatment.
Come in. Come in.
Well, how are you today, my dear?
Hello, Doctor. I'm so very happy to see you.
Well, I'm always happy to see you, my dear. And how was your day?
Oh, it was terrible. Oh, I've got this new director and this leading man, and when I get home at night, I can't sleep.
Do you still have your headaches?
Oh, yes, Doctor. I have this headache, and it starts here, and it runs down my neck, all the way down to my spine. And, Doctor, I really need a treatment.
Well, you shall get it, my dear. You shall get it. Now, you're really going to enjoy this. Please prepare yourself, my dear. That's it.
What they had failed to realize was that the good doctor's wife had become suspicious of her husband's nocturnal visits to the famous star and had been having him followed. The tabloids headlined all the details of Clara's love bomb romance, and the doctor's wife named her as correspondent in the divorce action that followed. But the heavy scandal really hit the fan when her secretary spilled it all, despite Clara's lawsuit.
Hey!
Yeah.
Who won this afternoon?
We won.
Well, that calls for a celebration.
Look at that.
Among Daisy's delicious revelations was one that accused Clara of taking on the entire backfield of the football team for one of the leading colleges.
Hey, gang, which one of you guys made the most points today?
Hey, I did. 2 touchdowns.
Poor Clara. The list was just a little too long. The Golden Circle decided she'd gone beyond bounds as this all came out in the papers, including the items that she showered her beloved football heroes with gold cigarette cases and cufflinks and furnished several university frat houses, which housed her playmates, with bootleg booze, or squandered her cash playing poker, among other things, with her servants, male and female. The downfall of Clara, who was just about every red-blooded American boy's idea of the ideal girlfriend of the 20s, cinched Hollywood's reputation as a place wicked beyond recall. The round of priests, politicians, and purity leagues took up the call again, reviving the dark shadow of Arbuckle. It was after Clara had proved to be such a sloshing bucket of sin that Hollywood was labeled, perhaps libeled with doomsday finality, the cemetery of virtue. Such was the capstone on 10 terrible, crazy, scandal-ridden, gaudy, but golden years. The terrible 20s, with its train of disgrace and falls from glory, its death from dope and suicide, its mysterious or covered-up murders, its sex and sin sensations that shot like a persistent scarlet thread through the warp and woof of Hollywood's thread of gold. One beautiful Indian summer day in October 1929, the once sleepy village of Orange Groves swept up toward the cruel sun of glory, which spit out vengeful fire on their follies and fineries. They fell, and the revenging fire fell even faster over the prideful city. And all that was left was the taste of ashes. The vainglorious dream that Hollywood dreamed of itself all through the 20s, that even scandal couldn't humble, came tumbling down in the raucous pandemonium of the talkies and the unblinkable truth of the stock market crash. Heavy investors, their heads spinning in a sex-oriented, orgy-inspired bout with stars and prospective stars, those prostitutes to an industry dedicated supposedly to create images the great movie-going public could identify with, were forced to regroup. Only a revolution, a crusade for decency, could revive this dying industry. And like it or not, the former glove salesmen and junk dealers who'd become movie moguls were pressed to call for help. The Claras and her ilk were doomed to disappear from the heavens of stardom. But what stories they would have to tell.